So our initial procedures was to reconcile all purchase orders and invoices for the monthly bills and general ledger. We were. I'm going to paraphrase that. We were originally tasked to do this from the period of June 6, 2016 to April of 2022. We started from the most recent time and moved backwards. If we go to the next slide, we'll see that we'll go again to the right there. So we went from the time of April 2022 backwards to 2020, and we found that we were able to test over 5,000 items, and that was out of a total of 11,000. The first check of the period was about check number 33,000, and went down to check number 45,000, and that was almost $12,000 worth of checks. We examined over 5,000 of those, which is a population sample of 44%, which is a strong number. Our deficiencies noted were only 26 out of that group, which is less than 1/2%. We went back to the administration and to the board and said, well, we've only gone halfway through the task, but our procedures are showing us that at least for this particular item, we are not finding much of a problem. There were some small discrepancies within vouchers, small discrepancies within late payments, but overall, it was pretty strong. The one issue that did concern us, though, and we'll go to the next slide. No, let's go back to the timing. Back again. Okay, the bill date. We noticed that there were many, and really almost all of the checks that were written prior to the date that the board would be meeting and approving those bills. There is a resolution, which, if you can flick to that one. Okay, this is it here. So there's a resolution that's passed every year by the board. This is not an unusual resolution. And what it says is basically, and I'll paraphrase again, that the business administrator is allowed to pay bills in between meetings, so prior to it going to the board for resolution on an as-needed basis. This generally will tend to be things that are exceptions or emergencies. What we found, though, is that that seemingly all of the bills and all of the checks were written prior to the bill meeting, prior to the board meeting. Now, it could be a matter of convenience or whatnot, but it's certainly not the intent of what this resolution is. And in many cases, as far as we could tell, these bills and checks were actually clearing the bank prior to the board approving them. So we have a recommendation, obviously, that changed, and I think that has changed. Let's go on. The next thing that we were tasked to do was to look at reserves. There's a question of what kind of reserves that there are in the school, because from time to time there would be a budget that would be produced that would have the use of reserves on it, and the board wanted a little more specifics about that. Back up one, James, one more. And there's a reserve right now with regard to the cafeteria. The cafeteria has more surplus or more net position than the state would allow it to have. This is more of a phenomena of COVID, because the district received, and a lot of districts received, a lot of federal money, and that federal money put them over the top with regard to how much that they're allowed to keep in their bank account, and it's about a little over $400,000, and my understanding is the board already has plans for this as far as using it for maybe some salaries which are not being charged there to begin with, and some capital improvements, and that's a proper use of that money. The next set of reserves, go back to the reserves, is, it's easier to see it on here. There is a reserve from the Falcon Care. Falcon Care is a is a daycare, I guess, of sorts, that is a business-type activity. People come, pay fees to have services performed. In the past, it's been profitable. Prior years, up to $600,000 it's generated that can be used in the general fund, which generally just offsets taxation. And that had been the rule. When COVID hit, that business dried up because there wasn't any services to be performed for the year ended in 21 and 22. The year we're in right now, the 22-23 year, there is a budget amount of $200,000 to be sent over to the general fund. Whether or not that's going to happen or not, we don't know because the year's not over. Another reserve which has been used by the district is the iPad reserve. These are monies collected from parents for technology and iPad repairs, and these monies have been accumulated over time. And in the 21-22 year, $500,000 of that was transferred out to be used to purchase new iPads. And the balance at the end of that year was about $400,000. So that's another reserve. Kind of hard to read through. Okay, so the last task was with regard to the relationship of Monroe with Jamesburg. We were tasked to look at the tuition and transportation contracts that are being charged to Jamesburg and to see whether or not that there is appropriateness there. And we went through the years and found no problems except for the period of time of March of 20 and November of 20, where there was a internal agreement to discount Jamesburg 10% of their transportation fees. And this was something which was not approved by the board. The reason for it was because of cost savings with regard to the transportation that was being incurred in Monroe. The discount was applied to Jamesburg. Our recommendation there, though, is anything of this nature needs to be run by the board, and the board needs to approve it. It was from April to November. Let's go back one other time to, yeah, okay, the cafeteria. Yeah, in the cafeteria also, we checked all of the contracts with Mets and looked at the general ledger, looked at disbursements, and we didn't find any type of discrepancy there. So basically, the two things that came out of this report was that the disbursements that were being generated out of the business office, or the checks being cut, were being cut prior to the board approval, and this seemed to be more of the rule than the exception, and that should be the reverse. And also the discount that was granted to Jamesburg, although maybe or most likely reasonable, it's something which the board needs to approve and to act on, and not something which is just internally generated.
Thank you. Does any board members have any questions for Mr. Allison? No? Okay. I want to thank you for